Nice.
Okay, we're powering through April. Ready for April 9th?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's see what the Daily Stoics have in store for us today.
Mm-hmm.
April 9th, test your impressions.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Test your impressions. Okay. I'm interested to see how this is different from April 5th, trust but verify.
Mm-hmm.
Because that one was also about our impressions.
Yeah.
So maybe this is more of the same, like a different flavor, or we shall see. Alrighty, Epictetus says, from the very beginning, make it your practice to say to every harsh impression, you are an impression, and not at all what you appear to be. Next, examine and test it by the rules you possess. The first and greatest of which is this: whether it belongs to the things in our control or not in our control. And if the latter, be prepared to respond, it is nothing to me.
Yeah, it's like a different take on that same topic of the impression is really, again, like a thought or something, right? Like that's how I'm kind of looking at it.
Yeah.
And so question those thoughts.
And then I love the flavor that he gives, which is, because he's saying, like, question them according to these rules that you possess.
Mm-hmm.
He says rules like many rules, but he just talks about one here, which is, and he's saying this is the first rule and the greatest rule, which is examine whether it belongs to the things in our control or not in our control. So it's like, as the thought comes in, it's telling me something, it has some content about something. And whatever that content is, it's going to point to something in me or something in the world, or it's going to point to something, and it's my job to say, okay, what do I control and what don't I control here? And if I find that this thing is not in my control, then be prepared to respond, it is nothing to me. So, like, don't spend my energy. Yeah, exactly. It's none of my business. What I often find is, like, if a thought comes in, it might initially seem like it's like something outside my control. Like, I might, it might be like a complaint of like, oh, why is this person doing this? But it's not that, and that's outside my control. So it's none of my business, for sure. That's none of my business. But that doesn't mean that I don't have a job to do in this moment. Because my job to do in this moment is to recognize, well, hold on, I do have control of something here. So, like, let me pay attention to that and, like, get all of my focus on that stuff.
Yeah, like recognizing of, like I think that's the tough job. It's to recognize of, like even asking that question in the first place, like, hey, what do I have control over? Like, or something is coming, like, do I have control over this or not? Like, that's the first thing, but then you might say, I don't have a control over this, but you actually might have some control over, like,
or some element of
some element of it. And now it's like, so it's like, okay, if you notice it, it's not just that, then there's this additional thing.
Because I always have control over how I look at something, how I communicate about something, and how I behave around something. So there's always going to be this dynamic of me and the other thing. And yes, the other thing I don't control, but this me I do control. And so, yeah.
Like noticing it and then asking, do I have a control over this or not?
Mm-hmm.
And then if I do, then move on with it, and essentially, right, control it the way you want or you like. And if you don't, then that's the thing to forget about, I guess. What does Ryan have to do about this? What is he saying?
Ryan says, in an overly quantified world of policies and processes, some are swinging back in the other direction. Bold leaders will trust their gut. A spiritual guru will say that it's important to let your body guide you. A friend trying to help us with a difficult decision might ask, what feels right here? These approaches to decision-making contradict voluminous case studies in which people's instincts have led them right into trouble. Our senses are wrong all the time. As animals subjected to the slow force of evolution, we have developed all sorts of heuristics, biases, and emotional responses that might have worked well on the savannah but are totally counterproductive in today's world. Part of Stoicism is cultivating the awareness that allows you to step back and analyze your own senses, question their accuracy, and proceed only with the positive and constructive ones. Sure, it's tempting to throw discipline and order to the wind and go with what feels right. But if our many youthful regrets are any indication, what feels right now doesn't always stand up well over time. Hold your senses suspect. Again, trust, but always verify.
That is funny.
So he's also tying it back to the other day. I'm strangely kind of empty on this one. What do you got on it?
Yeah, there's a couple of things, but it's all kind of it's kind of repetition of the stuff that's been in the past couple of days. And it's just that process of having the trigger that says, hey, here's the thought, and then asking it that question of do I have control over this thing, or what can I do with this? That's the action item, or the kind of like the action to take from it or something for myself. Noticing those two things,
Two things. What you mean? What you have control over and what you don't have control over?
Well, the trigger,
the trigger.
Noticing the thoughts in the first place, trying to.
Okay.
If I'm in some sort of a train of thought for too long, I'm hoping to catch that, and then when I catch that, then I can ask it a question. Do I have control over this thing that it's trying to express itself through those thoughts, or is this outside of my control? And what do I have control over that? How am I
right. Yeah, I like that Epictetus has that as the first rule of is this in my control, yes or no? And if no, then discard that. And then it seems like there's the second question after that is, okay, so I don't have control over this, whatever I'm obsessing about, but I have control over something. So let me find that something that I do have control over, because that will keep me in the state of claiming my agency and my autonomy in the areas that God has actually given me this part of life to control, the way I see things and what I say and how I behave.
Mm-hmm.
So in every moment I have the opportunity to shift my attention over here. So I'm also I'm like trying to think of like what's after what Epictetus is talking about. What's after the moment where you're like, okay, well, yeah, I don't have control over what this person's saying or doing, or the fact that life gave me this diagnosis, or whatever the case may be. But now I do have a bunch of other choices, like legitimate choices. And so like that's the thing for me to be spending my time really paying attention to and acting on and questioning all of that, because there's going to be lots of self-deception sort of things that are going to come up that are going to be like, I'm true, and it's like, you're not true. So yeah, I see that as like the continuation of what he's talking about there.
Good.
I'm feeling pretty buttoned up.
Beautiful.
Let's wrap it up today. We'll see you here tomorrow, and we'll learn some more daily Stoic stuff.